I used to work nights at a small roadside inn, the kind of place you'd barely notice driving by. Just 3 floors, maybe 30 rooms in total, and most of them empty on weeknights. My shift ran from 10 p.m. until 6 a.m. It was usually dead quiet. Some nights, I didn't see another human being for hours, which was fine. I'd finish paperwork, scroll my phone, sip bad coffee, or half-watch the security monitors just to give myself something to do. The layout was simple. A little lobby with a couple of couches, a mounted TV no one ever used, a few vending machines, and the front desk where I sat. Behind me was a cramped office with a desk and a glass window, so I could still see the lobby if I ducked in. At night, the front doors stayed locked. Guests had to buzz, and I'd let them in. Most nights followed the same pattern. 1 or 2 late check-ins, maybe someone staggering in after the bars closed, and hours of silence. But one night about a year ago, something happened that I can't shake. It's the kind of memory that creeps back when you least want it. In the shower, walking home at dusk, or worse, when you're trying to sleep. It started around 11:30 p.m. when the buzzer went off. I hit the release, and in walked this guy. He looked mid-30s, tall but narrow in the shoulders, wearing faded jeans and a dark hoodie with the hood down. He carried a backpack slung over one arm. Nothing unusual there, but his face struck me. He wasn't smiling or even frowning, just blank, like a mannequin with eyes that lingered too long. He asked for a room. I quoted the rate. He slid a card across the desk. I swiped it, heard the beep, handed him a key card for a second-floor room. He stood there just a beat too long, staring at me like he was memorizing my face, before heading off toward the elevator. For the first half hour, I didn't think much about it. But right after midnight, I glanced up from my phone and saw him again. Only this time, he wasn't heading to his room. He was sitting on one of the couches in the lounge, facing the blank TV, just sitting there. No phone, no book, not even looking around. At first, I thought, fine, maybe he couldn't sleep. Guests sometimes lingered in the lobby. But 30 minutes passed, then another 15. He didn't move, didn't fidget. He just sat there like he was waiting for something. When I crossed the lobby to grab a bottle of water from the vending machine, I could feel his eyes burning into me the entire way. I didn't even need to look to know he was staring. Around 1:15 a.m., I decided to check the system out of boredom, and that's when everything went sideways. The room I'd assigned him to showed as vacant. I checked the logs, no check-in recorded, no payment processed. A credit card he handed me hadn't even gone through. I checked the keycard records, too. That door had never been opened once all night, which meant this man, who I had watched walk off like he was heading upstairs, never went to the room at all. He just came back and planted himself in the lobby. The realization hit me hard. My chest got tight. I tried to rationalize. Maybe a system glitch. Maybe I fat-fingered the entry. But the logs don't lie. The guy wasn't checked in. He wasn't a guest. When I looked back up, he was still there, motionless, facing the TV like it was playing something only he could see. I sat frozen for a good 20 minutes debating what to do. Eventually, I forced myself to approach him, asked if everything was okay. He slowly turned his head toward me, his face flat, and said in a low voice, "Can't sleep." Then he turned back without another word. I went back behind the desk, hands trembling. By 2 a.m., he was gone from the couch. My stomach sank instantly. I scanned the lobby, then caught sight of him at the far end of the hallway by the restrooms. Half hidden in shadow, just standing there, watching. After that, it was like he made a game of moving. I'd glance at the cameras and see him lingering in odd places, by the vending machines, just outside the stairwell, or standing perfectly still at the end of a corridor. At one point, he vanished into the stairwell for nearly 20 minutes. No movement, no sound. I called my manager, trying to sound calm. She told me not to overreact unless he did something threatening, but it already felt threatening. The air in the lobby felt wrong, like the space wasn't safe anymore. Around 3 a.m., I spotted him on the cameras again, this time outside a guest's door on the first floor. He wasn't knocking or trying to open it, just standing there, facing the door. I panicked and called the police directly. While I waited, he came back to the lobby and for the first time, approached the desk. He leaned over the counter, eyes locked on me, and asked if there was any food. His voice was so flat, it didn't sound like a question. I pointed to the vending machines. He gave the smallest, strangest smile, then drifted away again. Every second until the cops arrived felt like an hour. He kept repositioning himself closer and closer, once standing barely 10 feet from the desk, staring. My throat felt dry, my skin cold. I typed nonsense into the computer, just so I wouldn't have to meet his eyes. Finally, a little before 4 a.m., 2 officers came through the door. I pointed them straight to him. He was sitting in the lounge again, like he hadn't moved in hours. They spoke to him quietly, asked for ID, then walked him out. One officer came back to tell me the truth. The credit card was stolen, the name fake. He had no reservation, no luggage, nothing. He had conned his way in just to linger. They charged him with trespassing and the stolen card, but the cop admitted he couldn't explain why the man had been wandering the halls, standing outside doors, or watching me from the shadows. After they left, I sat behind that desk, staring at the cameras until my shift ended, half expecting his face to reappear. What still keeps me up at night isn't just that he snuck in. It's how long he was there. Hours silently roaming, watching, waiting. And how easily no one might have ever known if I hadn't noticed the empty room on the system. I don't know what his plan was, but I know in my gut it wasn't anything good. That night is the closest I've ever felt to being prey. Story 2. The night watcher. My name is Meredith, and I work the overnight shift at a lonely fuel stop just outside of town. The kind of place most people only notice when they're desperate low on gas, lost on a back road, or running from something they don't want to admit. I picked this job because it was supposed to be boring, predictable, a routine that didn't ask much of me. At first, that's exactly what it was. But routine has a way of lulling you into forgetting how fragile safety really is. It was a Thursday night, just past 1 a.m. The kind of night where the air feels heavy, like it's pressing against your skin, and the buzz of the overhead lights sounds almost like whispering. I was about to heat up a stale muffin I wasn't even hungry for when the bell over the door chimed. A man walked in, mid-40s, maybe older. Hair messy, jacket wrinkled, lips cracked like he hadn't touched water in days. He didn't move like a customer, no glance toward the coffee, no shuffle to the snack aisles. He just stopped near the counter and stared at me with this odd, fixed interest. "Hey there," I said, forcing a friendly tone I didn't feel. He smiled faintly and asked, "You always work this late?" I hesitated. "Mostly, yeah." That answer seemed to please him. "I figured," he said. "I've driven through a few times." "You're always here." Something about the way he said it twisted my stomach. He shouldn't have noticed me like that. Not in detail. Not enough to track. Before I could brush it off, he said my name. Meredith, right? The blood drained from my face. I wasn't wearing a tag. I opened my mouth to demand how he knew, but he lifted a hand, gesturing to the whiteboard by the coffee station. I had written out "Hazelnut roast is back." Earlier that night. "You have a very particular style," he said softly. "Most people dot their I's with circles. You use slashes. Clean, efficient." I admire that. I couldn't find words. He didn't buy anything, didn't move toward the door, just studied me like I was an exhibit behind glass. Then, with a little nod, he introduced himself as Paul. "Just curious," he said, and walked back into the fog. That should have been the end. But he started returning. Not every night, just often enough that I stopped pretending it was chance. Sometimes he came inside, lingering over a single bottle of water. Sometimes he parked in the far corner of the lot, headlights off, car idling, waiting. One night, I tried ignoring him. He leaned against the counter, quiet for a long while, before asking, "Don't you get lonely? Out here by yourself? Miles from anyone else?" I muttered something about being fine, but he tilted his head like a curious child. "You ever feel afraid being a woman alone at night?" His tone wasn't menacing. It was casual, conversational. That made it worse. And he said, almost offhandedly, "Smart of you to lock the back door. I've noticed you check it around 2:30 every night." My throat went dry. He gave me that same faint smile, the kind people wear when they think they've said something kind. "I'll leave you to it," he whispered, and slipped away again. After that, everything changed. I carried my car keys in my fist, sharp ends ready. Kept a wrench under the counter. Started locking the bathroom door when I showered at home. Even though I lived alone. There were nights I didn't see him at all. Those were worse, because I never knew when he'd return. One evening, I stepped back into the store after a smoke break and froze. A Polaroid sat on the counter. It was me, crouched at the windshield washer bin outside, taken from uncomfortably close range. Too close. A red circle had been drawn around the slash dot on the I in the word windshield. The next time Paul showed up, I snapped. Told him to leave. Told him I'd call the police if he stayed. He looked at me with something between pity and fascination. "I just thought you'd appreciate someone paying attention," he said gently. "That's not attention," I snapped. "That's obsession." He tilted his head. "Would it make you feel better if I bought a soda each night? If I chatted about the weather like everyone else? Pretended I didn't notice the way your left eyelid twitches when you're tired? Or that your sneakers are half a size too big?" My hands shook as I dialed 911. He didn't resist. When the officers arrived, he stood calmly, arms at his sides, as though this was just another stop in his day. In his car, they found a notebook filled with pages of my life. My schedule, my breaks, what I ate, when I left. One page had my name scribbled over and over until the letters collapsed into a dark knot of ink. "I'm just curious," he kept repeating. "I just noticed things." They arrested him. The restraining order went through. I was transferred to another location hours away. I don't work nights anymore, but that hasn't helped. Because now, whenever headlights follow me too long on the road home, the skin on my neck prickles. When someone says my name in casual conversation, I hear it the way Paul said it, like he'd practiced the sound in his mouth. And I wonder if people like him ever really stop noticing. Story 3. My name is Daniel. I work the overnight shift at a small rural motel. It's not a chain, just a family-owned place with 2 floors and maybe rooms in total. I usually work from p.m. to a.m. The motel doesn't get much traffic at night. Maybe a couple check-ins after midnight if someone is traveling through, but most of the time it's dead quiet. That's why I took the job. I'm not really a people person, so sitting in an empty building most nights works for me. The way it's set up is there's a main office with the front desk, some chairs, a coffee machine, and a little rack of brochures. Behind the desk is a hallway that leads to a back office. That back office is kind of like a lounge. It has another desk, a couch, a mini fridge, and a TV mounted on fuel. The cool thing is that there's a little speaker back there that dings whenever someone rings the bell at the front desk. So, normally, I just sit in the back, watch something on my laptop, maybe nap on the couch, and then when hear the bell, I get up and walk to the front. I've worked there long enough to know the regular rhythm of the place. The building cracks sometimes, the heater makes a clicking noise, and the front door buzzes when a guest uses their keycard after hours. Those are all normal sounds. But the thing about working the night shift is even the normal stuff can get under your skin if you think too much about it. And sometimes the things that seem normal at first turn out not to be. This happened on a Tuesday night back in fall. It was cold outside, maybe in the S, and the parking lot was empty except for 4 or 5 cars belonging to guests. It was about when I first heard the bell. I stood up from the couch in the back and went into the main office. When I got there, nobody was standing at the desk. The lobby was empty. I looked outside through the glass doors, but the road was dark and seemingly empty as well. There were no cars pulling in or headlights or anything. I thought maybe I had imagined it, but the bell is loud and clear, so I knew I hadn't. I stood there for a minute, waiting to see if anyone came in late, but no one did. So I went back to the lounge. I sat on the couch, pulled out my phone, and scrolled for a while. Not even minutes later, the bell rang again. I jumped up and walked quickly into the main office, but once again, it was empty. The hair on the back of my neck stood up this time. I went to the doors and stepped outside. The parking lot looked the same as before. The cars were all parked with their lights off, and there was no movement anywhere. The road was completely empty, too. I walked to the edge of the sidewalk and looked both ways, but there wasn't a single sign of life out there. I went back inside and sat behind the front desk, this time instead of going to the back. I figured maybe some drunk person was messing with me. A ding-dong ditch of sorts. Maybe egoist's kid thought it was funny. But after sitting there for minutes with nothing happening, I started to relax again. I leaned back in the chair, opened my laptop, and figured it was just one of those weird things I'd laugh about later. Then the bell rang again. I snapped my head up so fast that it hurt. The lobby was still empty, nobody in sight. My skin started to crawl. I stood up and walked around the front desk to make sure nobody was hiding, but there was no one. I checked the bathrooms off lobby. I even stepped outside again, but nothing. I walked the lot a little, shining my phone flashlight, but it was just dead quiet. I went back inside, and that's when I decided to try something different. Instead of going back to the lounge, I sat down in the chair right behind the front desk. If someone was sneaking around and ringing the bell just to mess with me, I wanted to better to catch them. I turned the lobby lights down a little, so the room was diamond. I just sat there listening. It was so quiet that every little sound made metwitch. The clock ticking on the wall sounded louder than usual. The fridge in the back office clicked on and hummed. Every couple of minutes, the building creaked as it settled. I sat there with my arms crossed, staring at the bell on the counter. Minutes passed. Then my eyes started to get heavy, and I thought maybe Thepperson had given up. I even started thinking I just imagined the whole thing. Just as I was letting myself relax and doze off, it happened. The bell rang. Only this time, I saw what was doing it. A pale hand came up from under the front desk, reaching over the counter and pressing the bell right in front of me. I jumped up so fast, I'm sure the chair almost fell over, and it bolted down the hall into the back office. I slammed the door and locked it, and I stood there in the dark, my chest pounding. My mind was racing, trying to figure out how someone could even wander there. The desk doesn't have much space underneath, but it's enough for someone to crouch if they squeezed in. That meant they'd been hiding just a few feet away from me, waiting. I forced myself to look at the security monitors. There were 4 cameras, one on the lobby, one on the hallway, and two on the parking lot. On the lobby feed, I saw the chair had apparently tipped over in my rush. The counter looked empty. Then in the bottom corner of the frame, I saw movement. A head poked out from behind the desk. I couldn't make out details, just the outline and the glint-off eyes staring straight into the camera. I backed away from the monitor. I couldn't look at it. I grabbed my phone and dialed with shaking hands. I whispered to the dispatcher that Simeon had broken in and was hiding in the lobby. She told me to stay where I was, and that officers were on the way. While I was on the phone, I watched the monitor. The person's head disappeared, and then I saw the person crawl out from behind the desk on hands and knees. He crawled to the door and then stood up. He was tall and wearing a hoodie with the hood pulled tight, and his posture was hunched over. Then he turned around and started walking around the lobby like he was looking for something. And then he turned and walked out of the camera frame toward the hallway that led to the back office. I pressed my back against the locked door. A moment later, the knob rattled just once, a very slow rattle and nothing. The dispatcher kept asking if I was safe, but I couldn't even answer for a few seconds because my throat felt like it was closing up. After what felt like forever, I heard slow footsteps moving away. I rushed back to the monitor. The man was pacing around the lobby again. At one point, he stood in front of the glass doors and just stared outside like he was waiting for someone. Then he walked over to the brochure rack and started flipping through the papers as if he were sarcastically killing time. Minutes dragged by. Finally, I saw flashing blue and red lights through the parking lot cameras. The cops pulled up. Two cars. The man must have seen it too, because he suddenly bolted out of frame. A second later, I heard the front doors open. When the officers cleared the building, they found a large rock near the front door that was presumably used to prop the front door open, but they didn't find him inside. He was gone. They searched the lot, checked the road, and the officer told me whoever it was must have slipped out as soon as they pulled up. I kept playing it in my head after, the way that hand just came up from under the desk and pressed Thebble. Calm as anything. Now, every time I hear that bell at night, I think of that night and experience. I don't think I'll ever look at that desk the same way again.